I'm Lisa Stone, and you are listening to Season 8 of Parenting Aces.
Hey guys, how are you? Sorry I'm a couple of minutes late. I kind of got stuck trying to get here.
Hey, Lisa and I were just talking. Scott, you have 13 minutes actually until you get defaulted. Yes, because you have 15 minutes default rule to show up. And since you're showing up a little bit late, I'm going to have to penalize you at least a toss plus one game.
Well, I was just in the bathroom.
And I don't really want to listen to any type of traffic excuses or you actually showed up at the wrong site. Or maybe you even looked at the wrong draw.
Probably. But didn't my mom check me in?
That's right.
As you can tell, my guest this week had a little bit of fun before we started recording. I'm so happy you decided to tune in to the Parenting Aces podcast for this first episode of our 8th season. Wow. As you heard, we have some new music, so a big thank you to my son, Morgan Stone, for contributing some creative efforts there on our behalf. And I'm just so happy and excited that we have another great season of interviews and discussions for all of you out there that are interested in learning more about our sport and doing what you can to make it better, not just for our children, but also for parents, for coaches, for the governing body, for the officials out there, anyone that's connected to tennis and is invested in seeing it grow and thrive. In this episode, we have a really interesting and fun discussion with two well-respected tennis officials, Scott Handback and Gary Link, and I know you're going to learn a lot from these two gentlemen. They will give you some very insightful food for thought as we start the new year, and I hope you just enjoy it and that you decide to share it. As always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to Parenting Aces, and you can do that by clicking on the link at ParentingAces.com. If you are listening to us via one of the podcast apps, you can subscribe to our feed through the app as well, and always, we love for you to share the podcast, the articles on ParentingAces.com, and your thoughts on anything that you hear or read through our website and podcast. So please feel free to reach out to me, Lisa Stone, at lisa@ParentingAces.com with your thoughts and suggestions. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode, our first of 2019, with Scott Handback and Gary Link. Gary Link and Scott Handback, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited to chat with the two of you. So I'm going to start with you, Scott, because my audience knows Gary a little bit. We did a podcast earlier, and so they've heard from him. But Scott, I want you to talk about how you got started in tennis and what you're up to now.
Where did I begin? I've been in tennis since I was a kid. Played college tennis at Queen's University of Charlotte. I've been teaching tennis since I was 17. As a lot of guys, it's one of those things that you're going to do for a year out of college, and then next thing you know, 20 years later, you're still doing it. I coached college tennis. I've coached at private clubs. I've been the general manager at private clubs. I currently own Deer Valley Athletic Club in Boone, North Carolina, so I'm a club owner. I'm on the court coaching. I've been a USTA official for 25 years. I've coached. I actually had a player last week signed to go play college tennis, and it was actually my 68th player to go play college tennis, so I'm getting pretty old now.
That's a very impressive resume, though, gotta say.
I don't know about that. It's just been around a long time.
Well, that too. And Gary, how about you? Give us the down and dirty on Gary Link.
Yeah, Lisa, from our past, earlier this year, we did a podcast, and I've been in officiating for 24 years, and just played. Started at age 25 playing, and just really got into the game because I really enjoyed being around kids. I really enjoyed being around the juniors and seeing them develop. And then it led me into adult competition. And then now it just leads me a little further into trying to help the sport, trying to identify areas where we can grow and develop and learn from each other. But also, obviously, there's different dynamics that play into the success of any type of organization or any type of sport or hobby or anything that we do. And it just takes a collaborative effort, together, parents, players, coaches, officials, administrators. And that's why I like the game, and I want to stay in the game, and I want to be able to be an influencer in the game on a positive note.
Got it. Well, Scott, what precipitated doing this podcast was a Facebook post that you made a few weeks ago, announcing basically that you were done officiating and going through a very detailed explanation of why. And I would love for you to share that, and then for the two of you to talk about the points that Scott brings up and what we need to do to, and I'm using air quotes, fix our sport. Well,
the Facebook post that you saw was part of a letter that I sent to Bill Ozaki in Southern Tennessee, and also to North Carolina Tennis Association, to let them know, what I was not going to be doing going forward. And what precipitated that was just some experience at a couple of tournaments this fall. It was just kind of a culmination of what's been going on over the last couple of years. Kelly Gaines, who's the executive director of North Carolina Tennis, actually forwarded that email to USTA National. And believe it or not, actually said that I was spot on, which it's great to kind of have her as a backing of what I was saying. I witnessed so many things in a Southern Level 3 tournament a few weeks ago that I was the referee for. We had rain on Friday night, which rained out the doubles. We had a late start on Saturday because of rain as well, wet courts. Not every court was wet, but there was enough of them wet that we got a little bit of a late start, and just some of the behavior that I saw is just not conducive to what we want in this sport. There's been a lot made nationally by parents, by players, by USTA about players quitting this game in the first tournament or two because of cheating. And honestly, it's not the cheating that I see as the biggest issue. I think we've got a much bigger issue. I think the bigger issue is, and I don't know if you want to call it the professionalism of junior tennis or what it is, but, parents are getting upset at a very local North Carolina level 5, 10 and under event about how their kid's winning or losing or not winning or losing. They're getting upset because they feel like the other opponent made a bad call. And, guys, that's entry level. And that's where you're just learning how to play this game. And you're learning what a tournament actually is. And, for our parents to be behaving at that kind of level, at that level of a tournament, I mean, this isn't junior Wimbledon. This is the 25th level of junior tennis. And they're treating it as though it's junior Wimbledon. Right. And, to me, I feel like we have I've said for many years that parent education, we do an awful job of parent education with USTA, that most times parents learn about the sport, tournaments, what's going on, regulations, heck, even junior development. They learn from other parents. And we've got to do a better job of educating our parents so that they're better parents, better tennis parents. So, well, I mean, that's exactly why Parenting Aces exists, is because as a parent myself, I couldn't get my hands on the information I needed to do my job well and to help my kid do his job well. So I'm the first one to raise my hand in agreement with you when you say that we need to do a better job educating parents. That's what I've been working toward for the past 7+ years. And, I feel like it's still a huge need. It's absolutely a huge need. Most of them don't even know the rules. And it's hard. I mean, I look at Friend at Court, which is the rule book that we use to run USTA tournaments. It's 300 pages. And, you know, that's so hard for a parent to understand how a tournament works, or, you know, what happens in this scenario, what happens in that scenario. And then you put into effect that, you know, and don't get me wrong, and Gary, don't take offense. I'm a USTA referee and USTA official. There's a lot of bad officials out there who don't know themselves all the rules. They don't know how to implement them. And then when you have, you know, a USTA national level tournament is run completely different than a Southern level tournament, than a North Carolina level tournament, you know, the rules are actually implemented differently. And, you know, so it's real hard to have a consistent product through all that.
Gary, I'll let you to chime in here. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and Scott nailed it. And the way that he explained it is that it's really a broad type area of inconsistencies among officials. I see it. Scott sees it. I think, obviously, Lisa, you saw it when your son was going through it. And there was a lot of inconsistency. It's not specific to a state. It's not specific to a level. We see the officiating. We even see the lack of organization among certain type of tournaments. And I think that causes a lot of frustration among players, among parents, and it generates a lot of different type of stress where they spend a lot of money on lodging, they spend a lot of money on food and gas and transportation to get there, and then they do not get the product, or maybe they do get the product. It's just that, you know, there's not an equality across the board, and I can't stress enough that the officiating piece is so critical to the fairness and to support, you know, whether it be Scott in a director's role or whether it be Lisa Stone in a director's role. You know, the officials make the directors look good. And that's no different than in our workplace, where, you know, our staff can make a director or a, you know, direct report look good. And so we've got all of these different types of dynamics that are coming into play. And let me say, too, is that Scott and I have not spoken since Charlotte, since we did work together on this tournament that did not reveal the results that we wanted. And when I read his Facebook post, it really uncovered some things in me that really were just, it was true, and it was fair and well balanced about how he explained it. He took ownership of what he took ownership for. He also addressed other areas that needed improvement. And I thought that was extremely genuine, because a lot of times you read a lot of posts, you read different types of summaries that just blame us. It's a blame game. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see that in Scott's post. I thought it was very well written. I thought it was very well balanced. And I thought it was one that really needed the attention. And that's when I said, you know, we really, really need to take this and act on it so that we can improve the game and not just let it be just another Facebook post.
And let me just say for the listeners, I am going to copy and paste the Facebook post in the show notes on ParentingAces.com. So if y'all want to read that, you'll be able to access it very simply.
Well, thank you, Gary. You know, when you've done this a long time and you've, you know, and I have a different perspective in that I have been a coach and coach players on the other side of it. You know, I'll give you an example. I was at a national 12 and under tournament in Peachtree City that I think Robert Sasseville was the tournament director for. And, you know, and so I'm a coach. I've got a player out there playing that, you know, was up 6-0, 3-0. And on that 3-0 changeover, the roving official sat down with my player's opponent on a changeover for 4 minutes and talked to that player. And that player calmed down and turned into an amazing player after that. It was almost kind of like the Curios event at the U.S. Open this year.
Wow.
And, and my player ended up winning the second set 7-6 after being up 3-0. And I went to Robert and I just said, look, I said, I'm an official too. And I said, that official coached in that match. And I said, he changed the outcome of that match, and you can't do that. And so, they ended up dealing with that. And that's why I say, it's not just the officials. It's not just the parents. It's not just USTA. It's not just tournament directors. It's not just coaches. It's everything going on in junior tennis right now that we have got to look at. And, I equate it to say soccer. If you have a local soccer league, you have soccer leagues, and then you have travel league, and then you have ODP, Olympic Development. And we're treating like a local level, North Carolina level 4, as though it's ODP, as though it's Olympic Development. And it's just a local league. And yet the parents have the expectation of Olympic Development. The players do, the coaches do, and it just, and unfortunately, most of those tournaments definitely don't have enough officials. How do you have enough officials for a 60-person tournament that's barely breaking even? And, and a lot of people want to say, well, the officials cost so much. Well, the balls cost a lot. The expected T-shirt costs a lot. The trophies cost a lot. And when you look at the entry fees and you look at everything, the parents are paying a lot more. And so their expectations have risen. I remember that same Southern tournament that in Charlotte that Gary and I are talking about. We had rain 15 years ago when I was first involved with that as a referee. And the parents all stepped up and squeegeed courts. Do you know how many parents grabbed the squeegee this weekend at the 4 sites to help clear the courts out on Saturday morning? Not one. Not one. And I'm not saying that that's the norm, but I'm just saying I think the expectations have changed over 15, 20 years ago in junior tennis. The expectation of the parents and the players. And right now, I don't think, as far as junior tennis goes, I don't think we're meeting those expectations. And that's creating a lot of issues.
What do you think precipitated that, Scott?
I'm sorry?
What do you think precipitated those increased expectations?
The amount of money they're spending. They're spending a lot of money. I had a kid that was a national level 12 and under, and they spent $35,000 a year just to travel and play tournaments. Forget instruction, forget a racket. That's just to travel and play tournaments. $35,000 a year, and the expectations go up. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think they expect more because of that.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Oh, go ahead, Gary.
No, I want to interject here too, is in saying that I think we have a referees meeting, prior to the start of the day, and we had at this specific tournament that we're speaking of, Scott pulled us all together on a Friday afternoon. We were supposed to start doubles that evening, and I thought there was something that Scott said to all the side officials that was extremely critical and very important, and I never have heard it before, and I thought it was very, very true. And something that I had never forgotten is that what we used to see in the 14s, we're now seeing in the 10s. What we used to see, the expectation and the pressure and the demands and the high expectations, and you can put relative around the quotations around the high, as far as it's all relative as far as what my expectation and your expectation is when my son gets to be 14, and what do I expect from him at that age versus what do I expect when he's playing orange ball or green ball at 10 years old. But I think what Scott mentioned that day on that Friday afternoon is that it is pushing down. It's pushing down into the 10s. And where did it change where basically going out and learning the game in a fun environment, in a healthy environment, where our parents supported that that agenda of having a very healthy and fun environment to where we can keep these players in the game that we all love, that we play, whether we're 16 or 66. And we find, and I think it's absolutely true, is that the pressure and the expectation is moving downward into the tens, which is obviously creating a lot of frustration for our kids. Mm-hmm. And what our kids are doing, Lisa, and I know Scott has a wealth of knowledge in this, is that what our kids are doing is they're looking around for approval, and they're looking at how their parents are reacting to a certain situation. And if that parent is behaving in a way that's negative, the child doesn't discern whether it's negative or positive. The child is only discerning that it's right because that's their parent. And what's happening is these kids are walking onto the court feeling empowered and feeling like they have the authority to be able to challenge as their dad did the previous week or the previous month at another tournament. And it is pushing down into the tens. Scott, do you have any comments on that? And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
No, I agree. I mean, I was a national zonals coach for 15 years. And, served as the Southern coach at the national hard courts and clay courts for, so the things that I used to see at those kind of events, you now see in the 10 and unders. I had a mom a couple of weeks ago at a North Carolina level 5 a couple of months ago, that I had to kick out of the tournament. Now, this is a North Carolina level 5. This is an entry-level tournament, like really entry-level. And she just would not leave it alone that the two players on the court were in agreement with what was going on in a 10 and under match. And she kept trying to interject and make sure that everything was right. And I said, ma'am, as long as they're fine, you need to stay out of it. And I'm talking about over 3 and 4 matches over the weekend. So finally, by the third match, I said, ma'am, you can't be here. You've got to stay in the parking lot. And it's kind of like, guys, they just need to learn to play. And that's the thing, as Gary said, pushing down to the 10 and unders. It's also pushing to the local levels. The things that you used to see, the competitiveness you used to see at a national level, you're seeing that in a, first tournament they play. I had a guy, the last tournament I did at Blakeney, it's a North Carolina level 5 event. It was a level 4, but then we had overflow draws as a level 5. And his son's 10 and under, and he comes walking up going, future U.S. Open champion right here, and says about his kid in front of not just his kid, but the whole tournament desk. I mean, what kind of expectations are you putting on right there? And, I know that there's different cultures in tennis now than there used to be 20, 30 years ago. And I understand that there's, it's different than it was 20 years ago, and it's not going to be the same. But we are still trying to put out the same product in a lot of ways as 20 and 30 years ago. And we've got to make some changes to it. When we made the decision to go to no ad scoring on the Saturday of that level 3, because we were getting a late start and because we knew as a tournament that we were going to be playing until 8 or 9 o'clock already, even if we did go to no ad because of the delay in getting started. When we made the announcement of no ad, I had 4 emails, 11 phone calls, and 6 people come to the site and get in my face saying that there was absolutely, I cannot believe you're going to no ad. This is a joke. This is ridiculous. And, it's like, come on, people. I mean, what we're trying to do here is to make it better for you. We're trying to keep somebody from being here at 10 o'clock tonight, 11 o'clock tonight, midnight tonight, trying to finish these matches to get done so that you then can play tomorrow. And I think actually USTA's done a lot of good things in regards to the structure of junior tennis. I think, if you remember, Southern Level 3s back 10 years ago were playing on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And we used to have a lot of issues with players who lived in Louisville trying to play a tournament in North Carolina they decided just go back on Sunday night and no show for that last round or 2 rounds on Sunday or on Monday. And then the local person stayed out of school, and yet they didn't get to play because nobody communicated. You had the backdraw flu, as they say, which is another issue that I think we have to address. There's so many people who, and it's ironic that it's some of the same people who complain they never have anybody good to play at home, and then they pull out of backdraws left and right. Again, there's a lot of things that I think we've gotten better. I think there's a lot of things that, we still have to address if we want to have a good product out there and to have the parents and players happy with what's going on.
Let me ask a question, Scott. When you were coming up as a junior player, how many tournaments a year did you play?
Gosh, I probably played 8 or 9.
Right. And kids today are playing 2 and 3 a month, every month, 12 months a year.
Yeah.
What, in my mind, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this, in my mind, one of the underlying issues of all of this is that we as adults are trying to control the amount of play that our children have instead of leaving it to them to arrange practice matches, to meet a friend at the courts, meet 3 friends at the courts and do a round robin on a Saturday, which is free, or maybe there's court fees involved, but certainly doesn't come close to the cost of traveling to an event out of town, or even paying entry fees at a local event. What do y'all think about the idea of that we've just got too many tournaments now?
Are there too many tournaments? I think so. I know a lot of times in North Carolina we have 6 and 7 tournaments in a weekend.
Of varying levels, you mean? Or
yeah, obviously different levels. Level 2s, 3s, 5s. But still, there's many weekends we'll have 6 and 7. And when you combine that with all the colleges in North Carolina that have college matches, boy, all of a sudden trying to get officials to run a tournament is real tough. And then, I also think that, nobody does what you're talking about, pickup matches. Nobody picks up a phone. Even my own players that I coach, getting them to pick up a phone and call somebody is just, it's, like pulling teeth. And a lot of it is because people don't want to play someone that they'll lose to. They're scared of losing. They're scared of playing that person nearby because they're usually in competition with them for a spot on the high school team or, in clinic or whatever, and they'll only do it if the coach puts it together or they have to. And I don't know. I guess we just didn't, back at that point, we didn't think about that so much, or maybe I'm just getting old and crotchety and I don't remember the way it used to be.
Well, I think part of it too is, and I don't know how old you are, Scott, but when I was a kid, we saw our ranking once a year in December.
Yeah.
You had no idea. I mean, you had an idea based on who you were beating and losing to, but in the grand scheme of things, you really didn't know where you were going to fall in the rankings. Now, kids' rankings get updated every week. Even their UTR, their TRN gets, their star rating gets changed twice a year, but their ranking on TRN, fluctuates week by week. And I feel like a lot of what's happening is being driven by that as well.
Yeah, and Lisa, I wanted to address this to Scott. And Scott, is how much of it do you think that is really the incentive factor? Is that if I call up a friend or if I call someone across town and I play with them, okay, I get practice time out of it, but it's all about the point system and earning enough points to where I can actually get into that level 2 or that level 3 Southern. How much of that do you think plays a factor in the amount of tournaments and the amount of play that parents are pushing toward? And is the point system driving all of this saturated play?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there. One, I remember back when USTA rankings were based on the star system. And part of the reason that they went to the point system 15 years ago was that nobody was playing. They were using the old star system, which is similar to tennis recruiting, and where a loss very heavily calculated into the ratings or the rankings. So, for example, you could beat, let's say you've beaten everybody, 15 of the top 20 players in a ranking list, and your only losses are the top 5 players. And you have this one loss to number 40. So your ranking would actually be down probably close to 30 because of that one loss. You could go in the old star system, you could go to a tournament, be the number 1 seed, win 0-0 every match, and your ranking would still go down because you didn't play players above you. So back then, if you looked at the national level players, they were only playing about 30 to 35 competitive tournament matches a year. And if you look at them now, they're all about 120, 130 as far as the number of matches they're playing in a year.
That's a huge change. That's a huge, that's 300%.
It is. And, but the argument back then was, and you got to remember, this is back in 2002, 2003 when we made the switch. I say we, USTA National. When they made the switch, it was because our players weren't playing a whole lot. And they weren't playing a lot of competitive matches. And Andy Roddick was, the only person out there representing U.S. men on the Pro Tour. And, when you looked at the number of people playing, there wasn't a whole bunch of them. They weren't playing a whole lot. And so they felt that we needed to find a system that encouraged people to play more. Well, obviously they got what they wanted. To me, with the players that I have coached, traversing this is I do it in a couple of ways. Number one, I tell my players and parents, you play tournaments for 2 reasons. Number one, you play tournaments to get the amount of points you need to compete at the level that you want to compete at, whether that's a national level, a sectional level, or a local level. If you want to compete nationally, then you've got to play a certain number of tournaments to get a certain number of points to qualify for that level. But more importantly, the reason you play tournaments is they're like tests in school. The work that we do on the court is your homework and your schoolwork. And when you go to a tournament, it's a test. And that test is not based on wins and losses. It's whether you have implemented what we have been working on. If you go to a tournament, you can win 0-0 every match and fail the test because you didn't do anything we've been trying to do to make you a better player. Or you could pass the test and get killed first round. And so, unfortunately, I don't know if the coaches in our country, and don't get me wrong, we've got a lot of great coaches, so I'm not knocking coaches by any stretch, but I don't know if they necessarily have the time or the connectivity to the parents and players to get them to really understand about what all's going on. I run into a lot of coaches who don't understand sometimes how tournaments work, yet they're coaching a bunch of tournament players, and they don't understand all the nuances. So it's a big, complicated issue. It really is. And I think with the way tennis has grown over the last 15 years and tournament tennis has grown, I think it's become a big issue that we've got to look at how to fix.
So what are the solutions?
Gosh, I don't know. I think...
Come on now.
I mean, if you want my opinion, I'll give you my opinion.
I want your opinion.
I think education on every front. I think parent education, getting parents to understand the system, to understand the regulations, to understand that, you know what, my kid, to realize that you have 6 levels of ITF tournaments, you've got 6 levels of national tournaments, 6 levels of sectional, and you're at North Carolina level 4. You're at the 20-something level of junior tennis. Calm down. Let them learn how to play. Let them work on becoming a better player. And if you want to be at that ITF level or national level, if that's where you want your kid to go, then you know what, you need to figure out how to get them there. We don't have enough parent education. We don't have enough coaching education. I think there's some out there, but I think our coaches need to understand, again, how tournaments work, and and when you send a kid to a tournament, what are you trying to accomplish? And I know the coaches are going to tell you it's the parents. And I agree with the parents. It was funny. I was at a tournament a few months ago, and these parents are sitting here just griping and complaining about 10 and under orange ball. And it's just moonballing is what they're saying. And they were right. That's what was happening on the court in front of them. And, and they were just griping. And I looked at them, and just for shock effect, I said, well, it's your fault. And they all stopped and looked at me. And I said, well, think about it. I said, what's the easiest way to play in the orange ball 10 and under? If you want to win immediately, you push the ball and you just moonball. I said, but that's not what's going to benefit them long term. And I said, I guarantee you your coaches could coach your kid to play orange ball the way it was meant to be. The whole way it was meant to be was so that a 10-year-old could play tennis like an 18-year-old. And I said, but when you have the expectation that your kid has to win in 30 days and not give that coach a year to develop your players so that they can win, or 2 years, the coach is going to teach them the way that kid needs to win right now. And I said, so you've got to find a good coach and stay with them. And these were parents that were from a big city. So, as a coach, having been a coach in a big city, I can tell you, man, if the parent's not happy, they'll take the kid from you in a minute and go to this other program over here. And that's what coaches are fighting, unfortunately.
Right. Well, and I have to say, too, you talked about the education of the coaches and understanding how tournaments work. I have been to and or seen the agendas for enough coaching conferences and meetings to say that I have not once seen a presentation on the agenda dealing with how to navigate junior tennis tournaments.
Amen.
Who's presenting that? Who's teaching that? Nobody.
Well, and for example, here in North Carolina, we used to have the competitive training centers. We now have a program called Team North Carolina, but, I ran the competitive training center in Charlotte for years. And we did parent education at every session we did. So the kids are on court training, and the parents would do it would be scheduled for an hour. It always end up 2 hours because they all had a ton of questions to educate them about different facets of junior tennis, whether it was the physiological development, whether it was junior tournaments and ranking regulations, all sorts of different things. And, we don't do that as much anymore. Teresa is head of junior development for North Carolina. We're actually working on a parent education program that we can implement to get back to doing some of that. And it's not just the parents and the coaches, it's the officials too. I was the referee for the national 12 and under clay courts last year down at Lake Nona. And, one of the officials that they secured for me as a roving official, very nice official, knowledgeable of the rules, but she had worked 2 adult tournaments and several pro tournaments. She had no clue about working a junior tournament, much less a junior national event. And so I kept my eye on her, and there was one time where a kid had requested a medical timeout, and she granted it. So I walked out on court. When the medical timeout was over, I told her, I was like, hey, why don't you take a break? I'll take over. Because it really wasn't a warranted medical timeout. The kid was faking an injury. I mean, literally, he gets some of the point, and literally at the end of it just falls to the ground. And I don't mean falls as far as, having an episode. I mean, just, oh, my ankle hurts. And you could tell he was just basically stalling. It was that time in the second set. He was down, and he was trying to, get a break and change momentum. So he gets back up, and he's taken more than a lot of time, 20 seconds. I give him a time warning or a time violation warning. He's like, well, I'm trying. I was like, great. You still got to play within the time of what was required. He played a point. Then the next time he got a point, and finally he just came up and shook the hand, and he just quit, literally just quit. And then said it was an injury. It really was not an injury. I mean, he would run his rear end off during the point. As soon as the point's over, he's limping left and right like he can't put any weight on it. And so, it goes back to the official structure that we have, and Gary will tell you this, there is no pathway for junior tennis, but the issues you deal with in junior tennis are unlike anything else that you deal with as an official. running a pro tournament with lines, you're certified the same as you're certified for a roving official in a lot of ways. And actually we give more accreditation for going and becoming line certified or chair certified than a roving official running a junior tournament, yet the demands sometimes are much more complicated and usually require much more training.
Right.
That's the very excellent point, Scott, is that there's much more demand even at this type of junior level to be able to be fair, to be consistent, to be able to put a product out where, the parents are appreciative of the product. And it takes everyone. It takes a tournament director from getting the courts ready to having the environment ready and all of the amenities, and then to complement that with qualified officials. And Lisa and Scott, I know you both know this as well as your listeners, is that in a classroom setting, whether it be an online training or whether it be in a classroom, there's nothing like being on the court and knowing and learning and understanding through experience and the different scenarios that play itself out. When do you interject yourself? When do you not? I tell young officials when they see that there's a scoring dispute, don't jump on that court immediately and try to solve it. We want these kids to try to troubleshoot and try to problem solve. And if they get to the point where they can't, after you've been sitting there looking at them for 30 seconds or 45 seconds, then interject yourself. But, we need much more education, not classroom education, not online training education, but we need real training out on the courts to where these officials are getting on-hands training and on-hands experience. And that's something that you just cannot teach in the classroom. And it's when our officials, and again, the official that I was roving with there in Charlotte had 8 years experience. Now you might say 8 years, okay, well that's a lot, but maybe, compared to Scott and Gary, that's not a lot. 8 years is a lot of knowledge. And 8 years is a lot of information inside this one person that they have been there. They know how to kind of navigate it. They know how to kind of pull back. They understand that. But she's leaving the game this year. She's not coming back next year. And I said, would you tell me why you're not coming back? And she said, I'm not coming back because I don't want to get yelled at anymore by parents. And the
Gary,
second thing.
Gary, if I can interrupt you on that real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just to elaborate on that, this official that he's talking about has actually had a grievance filed on her from that tournament because she was actually implementing the time penalties on a kid because he was taking too much time. The kid was warned 3 different times by the site referee, still was taking too much time, and so she gave him time violation point penalties, I think 2 or 3 of them. Now she's got to go through a grievance process because the kid has filed a grievance against her because she was enforcing the rules.
Wow.
That's exactly right. And I was there when that happened, and she said, Gary, I don't need this. I don't need the stress. And forget all the pressure and all that. But you want me to be here all day, to give up my personal time and to service our members and our customers of the USTA, and then I get treated like this, even though if I try to enforce the rules? Don't you want me to enforce the rules? Yes, we do want you to enforce the rules, but what we're caught in between enforcing the rules and pleasing the parents, and you can't do both. We're there to enforce the rules, and she told me, she said, Gary, she said, I'm not coming back next year. And I told her, I called her by name, and I said, oh, yeah, something, I say that every year as well. But I'll be back next year because I really want to be here for the kids and to grow the game. And she said, no, I won't, because I did not recertify for this year, and because we have to certify by September 30th.
And the other thing that's going on is the ones who are good officials are going to the college side and doing only college matches.
Correct.
They
which
can
has
go
its own
for
set of issues, right? I mean, I read those blogs too. So.
Yeah, but at the same time though, they're going over. They can go referee a college match and spend 4 hours on a college match, and make more money than they can running a junior tournament all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And so all your better ones are like, and you know what? The only person that can yell at them really is the coach, and then they can they can penalize the coach if they want to without having to have a grievance filed on them.
Right. Let me ask you. Let me ask another question. Has there ever been a mentoring program with officials?
We have one in North Carolina.
Yes.
Gary, do you guys in South Carolina?
We do. We had a mentoring system in South Carolina, and then USTA National took it away 2 years ago, and now we're trying to get it back for this year.
What was the reason for taking it away?
They did not. They wanted their own structure. National wanted to somewhat push down their own pathway and their own structure of mentoring, and so they said that they basically just kind of slapped our hand and said, you're going off independently and doing something that we don't approve of as of yet.
Going rogue in South Carolina. Watch out.
Yeah. But matter of fact, when I get off this phone call, I'm going to be heading down to basically address, these issues of basically invoking a new mentoring system within South Carolina and looking at different types of junior competition and all that, which starts tomorrow morning at 7:00. So we've got a lot of different dynamics playing out, as Scott had really just brilliantly kind of alluded to in his post, which I know your viewers or your listeners are really eager to read that. And let me say this: while your listeners are reading that post and reading what you're going to post on your ParentingAces.com website, Lisa, I'm going to ask them to kind of look at the balance of that statement and the balance of that summary of it's just not parents. And just like Scott alluded to in the very outset of the call, we all have responsibility that we need to take. And we all have ownership in making sure that we put a product that is commendable, that we're proud of. And I just hope some way, somehow, is that Scott will kind of rethink going into 2019, hopefully that, there'll be a change of heart. We cannot afford to lose someone that has 8 years, 20 years, 30 years as a director, as a referee. We just cannot afford to lose them because the younger generation that's coming up, they don't want any part of this.
Right. And it's sad. It's really sad. But I have to say, I really do hope that y'all can reinstate your mentoring program. And I've been saying this for a really long time. If we could have a mentoring program among the parents as well, oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like we could really make some very positive changes.
Agreed.
Well, and I think you've done a great job with the website and with the group that you've put together and reaching out to tennis parents. I've read it through the years, and I think it provides a ton of educational opportunities for parents that they need because they're not getting it elsewhere. Whether it's the coaches don't want to tell them the absolute truth because, they don't want to lose the kid. And, and I guess my career has always been, I'm going to tell my players and parents the way it is. They may not like it, but I'm going to be upfront and say, this is what we're trying to do, and you've got to give me 2 years to get your player to X level. If you can't do that, great. Best of luck to you. But, I also didn't want to have my income tied to the success or failure of a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old.
Right.
And I mean, seriously, that's the way a lot of coaches look at it. And they're right in thinking that way. when the comments were going around over this last year about, cheating in junior tennis, I'm not going to say it's not there. It's absolutely there, but it's there everywhere. So is bullying. Bullying happens all the time, too, on the tennis court. But the biggest problem with junior tennis is not cheating. It's perceived cheating. And one of the issues that I have with it is that people think that when you get a bad line call, somebody is cheating you. Bad line calls happen every day. And if you don't believe me, watch a pro tennis match. How many times does somebody challenge and, yep, they were right, that official was wrong? It happens to one official looking at one line for a match. How in the world do you expect a 14-year-old playing a tennis point to get every call correct? They're going to make errors. And one of the experiments that I always do with my players and parents to prove this point is I'll put them against the fence behind the baseline. And I'll put a ball right on the back of the baseline to the point that it is literally like 1 millimeter out. You can see the dark color between the white line and the ball if you're standing at the net side. And so I'll ask them while they're standing against the fence behind the baseline, is that ball in or out? And 98% of the time they're like, oh, that ball's in. I'm like, okay, come around to this side. So they'll come to the service line and look back, and they see that little sliver, and they go, oh, it's out. I was like, okay, now look over the top of it. And they'll look over the top of it, and they see that it's hovering over the line. They're like, well, no, it's in. And I said, so you just gave me 3 different answers on a ball that hasn't moved. I said, a ball can be in and out depending upon your perspective. I said, so you could both be right that ball is in and that ball is out, and you're both correct. And I said, so, and I do it for the parents to get them to calm down from thinking from, 75 feet away, how in the world did that guy call a ball out on my daughter? That ball was in. You don't know. I'm sorry, you don't know. And even if you're standing right on the baseline, which parents like to do, no, you don't know. And to me, perceived cheating is a bigger issue because they'll call an official to court half the time, and it's like, dude, the ball was 8 inches out, and you're questioning it, particularly in the 10s because they can't see over the net very well. And, to me, that's a lot of issues. I really think once we get to where technology can make line calls, I think we've made a huge, huge step in making junior tennis better. I know we have it with PlaySight. I know that there's a group from Finland that has Zenith that's based on sound waves. And then there's In-Out, which is another product that's out there right now. But until those things can be implemented in junior tennis, or the sooner they're implemented in junior tennis, I think that solves a lot of problems.
Well, there are a lot of coaches and a lot of officials that say sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I think they really do mean it deep down, that we parents should just be banished from the tournament courts. We should just not be allowed to be there. And, as a parent, of course, you want to be there and watch your child, and you would never want somebody to tell you can't. But from the other side of things now, looking back, I'm wondering if it wouldn't have been better if I weren't there. If I could just get the report after the match is over and let my kid come tell me how it went, and it's his take on it, and I have nothing to refute that with, and so I got to take his word, and we move forward from that one. And
Lisa, let me interject here too, and I know we're kind of coming up on the end of the call, but we have, and Scott, you may experience this as well, but we have parents that are checking their son or daughter in. We've got parents that are bringing the balls back from the court and reporting the score. We have parents that are basically checking on their next time, and the child is somewhere 20, 30 feet away. So, and what we have had to do is we have had to say, reject the balls, reject the check-in. You have to have your son or daughter check in. I'm sorry. I cannot check your son or daughter in just by you as a parent, because we have got to start teaching these children these players to be independent, because when they're not independent outside the court, do you think they're going to be independent inside the court? No. So it starts from the time that they arrive at the facility, checking in for their match. We have got to have them, exercise independence all the way through until the very end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you're right, Gary. We are coming on the end of our hour, and I want to just make sure I give each of you a chance to say your last words and leave us with some food for thought. So, Scott, you want to go first?
Sure. Junior tennis is great, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I know I'm bringing up issues. I know I'm bringing up, things that we need to do better. It's because I care. I've been in this game for, my whole life. I have a career in it, and I have a vested interest in it. And junior tennis has been a big part of that. And I do think it's fixable. I do think it can be much better than what it is. And I do think it needs a collaborative effort on behalf of parents, players, coaches, officials, USTA, colleges. Everybody's got to have an input in trying to make this better. And, maybe technology is what we're waiting on to help solve some things, and maybe not. But, while I've said I probably will not, and yes, I'm leaving the door open, Gary, probably will not be a referee going into next year with any junior tournaments. I will still be around the game as a coach and as a club owner. So I will still be having an impact on the game, hopefully. And, just want us to all work together to make it better.
Gary, how about you?
I can't say it any better than how Scott opened up, is that junior tennis is good. Junior parents are good. The officials have certain intentions. They want to do well. The tournament directors want to put out a good product. And the different types of issues that we're seeing in the game and that's holding us back for advancement, we have to come together. And we have to come together at a time that we need to bring all of our baggage together and determine and identify how do we grow together instead of actually growing independent of each other. Because growing independent of each other, we have tried to do that for many, many years, and it's not working. It promotes a blame game, and it promotes nothing that's healthy at all for the 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14, 16, 18, and even don't forget about the 6 and 8s that are just entering the game. They say that 70% of the players that actually enter our game leave the game when they're 6, 7, and 8. We want to be able to put a product out there that's healthy, and that obviously is asking our parents, our officials, our tournament directors, and all of us collaboratively together to be able to put a product that we're proud of, that we know that we're going to have issues. We know we're going to have problems. But with the knowledge that we have and the knowledge, Lisa, that you put out and educational information that you put out each and every week on ParentingAces.com, and with all the resources that we have, we can do it. It's just a matter of putting a plan together to determine exactly what the answer is.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you both so much. You both have dedicated your lives to the sport, continue to contribute to the sport in such positive ways. And I'm really pleased that you agreed to come on the podcast and share all of this with the Parenting Aces audience. To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure and read the show notes on ParentingAces.com, and we'll catch you next time on the Parenting Aces podcast.
I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, I hope you'll share the podcast with your tennis community. For all the information you need to navigate the junior and college tennis journey, be sure to check out ParentingAces.com.